Hello and welcome to what I hope is the start of an audience booked by Boxofficegirl, which is me, Tracy Curzon-Manners. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined this morning by the wonderful Teika Marija Smits, who's going to be discussing her new collection of poetry, Russian Doll, which I have here. It's beautiful. Yes, and you have one too. And look, I've even matched my top. So
Yeah, that looks
I
great.
very subconsciously done that. But hello, Teika, thank you so much and for joining us today on the blog. It's lovely to see you.
You're
And
welcome.
I was just going to say to you, about your name. That's a really interesting name. Where does that come from?
It's actually Latvian, and it means fairy tale because I'm half Latvian and half Russian. And basically, to my parents, I was their fairy tale. So, because there's quite a long story about how they got together, because my mum's Russian, and my dad was Latvian. He passed away when I was 15. And so the way that they got together was it was sort of seemed it was one of those relationships that was against all odds, and he managed to get my mum out of Russia at a time when very few people were coming across.
Wow.
So I kind of so I was all part of that and all part of their story, because that was, I suppose, it was still really, it was in the time of the Cold War. So again, I suppose Westerners were very suspicious of Russians, and obviously there was that tension there. So he managed to get her out, because even though he was Latvian, he had come to England, and so it was a big long story how he managed to get her out of Russia. So I was their fairy tale.
Oh,
But now I actually write fairy tales myself, and because my maiden surname was Smits, and Smits in Latvian basically is a smith, and so I'm a fairy tale smith, and I really like that because it basically means I work with fairy tales. And I do, because I write them, but I also edit people's fairy tales and short stories, and it's just something I'm constantly I'm just really interested in it, because I think fairy tales tell us so much about life,
yeah.
and anyone's stories, teach us so much about life as well. And I think I always take a very sort of Jungian perspective about fairy tales, in that they can teach us a lot about about us as individuals. So I think
Mm,
it's fascinating what they can offer us, really.
mm. Well, what an absolutely fascinating start to this show, really. And I'm just so enamored by this idea that your name actually means fairy tale, but also the Smiths, as in storytelling. I mean, that's the stars aligned, didn't they? That absolutely was meant to be. That's
Yeah.
incredible. And I can't imagine there would be anything else that you would be doing in life.
Yes, it's one of those things, isn't it? When you're younger, like we were talking about the other day, that when you're young, you just want to fit in. You just want to be like everyone else. You
Yeah.
just want to have a regular name. You don't want people misspelling your name
Mm.
or asking you how to pronounce it. You just want a regular name. And so I think, again, it's one of those things that's only with maturity, really, or getting older, that you finally accept yourself. This is who I am, and this is my name, and then you learn to embrace it, I suppose. So it's been one of those things where I suppose it's only really as I'm older that I appreciate it more, whereas when I was younger, I suppose I just saw negatives.
Yes, I completely understand that because no child wants to be to stand out for how they feel is the wrong reasons.
Mm.
But it's like you say, it's something which you've come to embrace in your life. And actually, coming to your poetry, um, and I love the cover. It's absolutely delightful. But you write a little bit as well about in one of your poems you talk about, I think it's Anne Marie, and you talk, you know, that's quite a beautiful description of. I remember reading it, and I remember messaging you, I think, on social media saying, I know this girl, you know, because it's the standout kids in our life, that the ones that kind of make us feel less than we are without perhaps them even realizing it. But as you say, like your name, in later life, you remember these things and you learn to craft them into your work, which I think is exactly what you have done there, is to, you know, maybe it's a lesson in life that rather than seeing things, it comes with maturity, obviously. As kids, we can't see it at all. But those things that perhaps really hurt us or we struggled with, you know, we can turn those around and make something really beautiful and creative out of those moments, which I think is exactly what you've done with your poetry, because it's a poetry of two halves, isn't it? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it was it was quite interesting because I'd been working on these poems for many years actually. I think one of the earliest poems there was published from like years and years ago, maybe even 5 or 6 years ago. But you know, I would say, like, give, you know, any tips or to poets who are putting together a collection. It can take a long time for themes to emerge because, you know, I mean, particularly my poems, they seem quite eclectic. Sometimes when I was sort of thick in motherhood and breastfeeding, and obviously like giving birth was in my mind, I would write poems about those aspects of my life. And then when that didn't seem so immediate, it didn't feel so much like I had to put pen to paper and write about those things, I started just remembering other things and my childhood. And, you know, and in amongst all of that was a whole eclectic range of things. And it was only as the years went by that I realized that there were themes going through it. And, you know, as any reader of the pamphlet will see, the Russian doll the Matryoshka keeps popping up throughout. And I try and use echoes and themes and textures throughout my poetry, and I hope that comes across. But I think that's the thing. It was when I realized I was trying to put these poems together and I could see that it had themes there. But I kind of, now normally a sort of story is basically a beginning, a middle and an end. So to begin with, I was trying to cram it into 3 different things. I was actually trying to get 3 sections. And then I realized that wasn't quite working. I was doing too much. And in a pamphlet, you don't have that much space to work
You've got
with.
to become quite concise, right, haven't you? Yes.
Yeah. And then I realized that actually it split into 2 quite straightforwardly. So there was basically my life pre-becoming a mother, or mainly focused on my childhood experiences, and then the experiences of my life after I had become a mother. And then when I realized it was those 2, and it was mainly me as a daughter in the first section, and then mainly me as a mother in the second section, then I realized, well, this actually all makes sense, because the first bit then will be about my childhood and being a daughter, and then the second section will be about being a mother. And 2 very, you know, obviously there's similarities, but again, the difference in roles and responsibilities and maturity and feelings, it's really, I think that, I suppose the difference is really quite great, but that's absolutely fascinating to explore, I think. And, you know.
Well, you do it very well. And just looking through, I mean, there are some real standout pieces. And I think you were going to read one of them, weren't you? Just to give us a taste, it's about your mother. And I absolutely love this poem, I have to say. It just, for me, definitely a standout bit. But, you know, it's your work, so I think they would rather hear it from you.
Okay, so this poem is called Shades of Red, and it's about my mum. Shades of Red. Once an actress, my Muscovite mother knew how to make an entrance. Striking in fuchsia, she'd arrive late to my school performance, call my name, wave, have trouble finding her seat. I'd glow crimson and turn into the smallest version of myself, the littlest Russian doll, the one most easily lost, almost, but not quite invisible.
I mean, come on, what child has not been at the there are the parents who sneak in at the back and then even they manage a little wave. But
Yeah, that's
I
her.
mean, this woman, I can just see her in my mind's eye, and what a character. She just leaps off the page. It's
Yeah,
you
she really is larger than life, and she, you know, she's amazing, she's wonderful. And she genuinely was an actress, and she worked in as a model and a you know, and she was part of the film crew in Russia, and she is just, you know, just a beautiful woman, and larger than life, but she, you know, also performs.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and again, it's only maturity that makes you realize that that's just her, that's her personality. But when you're young, you just, again, you just want your parents to just fade into the background.
Yeah.
They're just not there.
It was your moment, and then there's this incredible woman, but the child doesn't see it that way at all. It's it's one of those moments, isn't it, where you think, no, please, just sit down, just. And I think I did say to you in a previous discussion, I'm sometimes in danger of doing the same thing to my own children, so I have to keep that in check. It's a natural exuberance, I think, which your mother obviously demonstrated. But what it's absolutely gorgeous what you've done with that. Shades of Red. It's a perfect title.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And you move on. Then you move on through. There's another beautiful poem, Mint Choc Chip, which I think it's quite a surprise, the shaping of it,
Mm.
isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
This
that's the
one,
thing.
actually.
Yeah, that's right. The ice cream. I think it's really important to give a variety of different form poetry and visual poetry. So it's just, I really like to, when I put together a collection, I really try and think about the reader and what might catch their eye and just be something a bit different. So yeah, Mint Choc Chip is it's about just a memory of eating ice cream, but also that references my sister, and she's actually she is 9 years older than me, and so I always felt very grown up, always wanted to be, my sister's so cool, so grown up.
Yeah.
And she was so cool enough to, to make this wonderful ice cream that I just have memories, I still have really positive memories. I can taste that ice cream of Mint Choc chips.
Yeah.
I think food memories can be quite potent,
Mm.
but wrapped up in all of that is just that aspect of childhood where it is innocent, as in there was, I still remember that there was no worries. The only thing that I had in my life was school and my family, and I pretty much like school, and I love my family, and it's living in the moment, isn't it? The one thing that you're really looking forward to is the ice cream, whereas nowadays we're so much on all the time, aren't we? Technology wise, we literally can be plugged in all day to screens. From the moment we wake up, we can start checking emails, checking Facebook notifications, checking whatever, right up until we go to bed, and I know some people can decide to try and keep technology as their bedrooms. I mean, that's what we've done, but I know that people do bring their phones into the bedroom, and they're, last minute scrolling, and it just shows how on we are always, and you know, our minds are in the future. What am I doing then? What did he say? What did she say? Whereas in childhood, that again is a really good example for us how to live in the moment. At that moment, I was looking forward to mint choc chip ice cream. I had no other worries in my life.
Yeah, but it's you know, and it engages all the senses, the taste, the smell. And you're right, you know, about living in the moment. And I don't take my phone to upstairs. I leave it downstairs. But my youngest daughter does use her bedroom to get away from mum and dad, and she's on the phone too much, really. And it's about re-engaging with the here and now, isn't it? And like you say, reminding yourself of the children we used to be and the pleasure of the moment, the freedom. Because with technology, we think we are freer, but I wonder, you know, really whether we are just we've hooked ourselves up to something that impacts too much on our time, on our creativity. But it is, you know, it's a lovely. I love the way you framed it in that shape of an ice cream. And then, as we move through the collection, there's a really quite heartbreaking piece, isn't there, about your father? Do you want to expand on that a little?
Yeah, it's a poem called "The Pulmonary Embolism," and it's I find it difficult. Obviously, I do find it difficult talking about it, and I'm actually struggling to remember the form, but I'm fairly sure it's a villanelle, and I'm sorry if it isn't, but it was funny because the thing is, when you write to form, you have to be very, very like when you've got a particular rhyming structure, you have to be like really on it with making sure that the rhymes work and they don't seem forced. And so obviously I've got these certain, you know, the certain rhyming words like shops and stops and props, and you know, it's really important to choose words that are kind of unusual, but not like that you've crammed them in. So the point is, it's all supposed to sound very natural. And so I was trying to write in that form, and then also tell the story of my dad's death, which is obviously like emotionally painful. But I suppose in some ways the form helped to kind of try and force my brain to think about you know, the actual structure of what happened, and sort of setting aside my emotions. I really wanted to get across you know, the kind of the whole movement and the rhythm kind of behind the story, as it were. Because obviously I do look back on that now, and that was the moment when I knew that my life was never going to be the same.
Yeah.
And so I think it works, and I think the form hopefully, you know, moves the story onwards, and obviously emotional pull. So I'll read it now, and hopefully the readers will hear it and be able to kind of to see and hear the rhythm.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's called The Pulmonary Embolism. One day my father goes to the shops. Walking back, his lungs collapse, his legs give way, he falls and thud. My world stops. His heart rate soars before it drops. Clouds roll in, the sky turns grey, the day my father goes to the shops. A passing neighbour sees and stops. He asks my dad if he's okay. I fell, he says. My world stops. An ambulance comes, one more of the props in this tragic real-life play, performed the day my father goes to the shops. The kindly paramedic mops my father's brow. She knows she cannot say it's just a fall. My world stops. Now death arrives to reap his crops, and they all know today's the day he'll die beside these shops. He falls and thud. My world stops.
I mean, it just cuts you, doesn't it, right there? Because you were 15, did you say? You were 15. So it marks the change really from childhood into that adolescent period.
Yeah.
In a very tragic and heartbreaking way. And I'm sure that there are many people who can relate to, particularly now, in this time of pandemic and loss and so much bereavement. But again, you have managed to employ the situation to create, something beautiful. You have taken your broken heart and you have literally turned it into art. So thank you for reading that, Teika, because I know it couldn't have been very easy.
You're welcome. It is always hard reading that, but I think that is a really important thing about poetry, that we can share our experiences and make connections to people. I mean, one of the ladies that bought my pamphlet, one of my writer friends, and she's a lovely lady, and we've spoken lots and lots of times before, but it was when she bought my pamphlet and she was reading it, and she said to me, gosh, the pulmonary embolism, that was, she just said that it really moved her, and apparently her mum died at the shops, and that was the first time that I knew that, and that just made me think, wow, that the poem had brought about that conversation. Because that's the thing, when you get to know people when they're older, you don't really know about their childhood or their background, and yet that's what poetry can do. If we share our most intimate, private moments that hurt, we can gain something from it by an extra connection with a friend, or with people who are possibly even strangers, that say, I understand that, or I went through that. And I think that connection is so important. And I'm a big fan of E.M. Forster, and his thing was only connect. That was a famous one of his quotes. And I do think that's true. With humans, what we really need to do is be able to empathize and connect with one another, no matter what our background or our experience or our age or whatever. We can connect with each other just through these moments.
Through our stories, through the stories that we share, isn't it? Like you say, to have the courage to hold it up and to show it to other people, so that they can relate in the same way that lady related to you, in the same way I said I knew that girl, when I read your earlier poem. And definitely, absolutely, we have to keep writing our stories down to share. Now I'm just conscious of the time, and we need to discuss the second part of your collection, which is about being a mother. And you begin that with the poem Making Heart Room, which is a really apt title. I mean, that it really is, isn't it? When a child comes into our lives, not only do we have to make room for them in the house, we have to make room for them within ourselves, within our lives. Everything changes again, and that's the human existence, isn't it? We are here to learn, to change, to grow. But do you want to just give us an oversweep of the second part, and then I know you want to end with a reading of Russian Doll, don't you?
I'm just conscious of the fact, like I said, I think poem titles of short stories, of books, they're so important. They can tell the reader so much. And so, I do have to point out that Making Heart Room was inspired by Naomi Stadlin's wonderful book. And she's the person who talks about making heart room. That's what happens when you have a baby. But I think it was just perfect. And I wrote my poem inspired by her writing, because she talks about how when you're pregnant. You've got so much going on physically with what's happening with your body, and people are very focused on that. How are you feeling? How's the baby growing? You know, how are your joints? How, you know, all of that. It's very much focused on the physical body, whereas people don't talk about, well, what's happening in your head and in your heart? How are you growing as a woman who's going to have to you know, go through the experience of pregnancy and birth, and then raising a child, which is creating a whole new amount of space in your life and home and everything. This is such a big thing, and everyone's just focused on body and the body changes. And so obviously what poetry can do, again, taking it back to, you know, storytelling, is really explore, well, how are we feeling in our heart and our heads? And I've, you know, I obviously I adore my children. I love them, and I've been very, I feel that motherhood has brought me more into myself. It's made me more accepting of myself. It's helped with, you know, just growing up, really, because when you do become responsible for someone else, you put aside your own worries, and you put aside a self. You put yourself aside, and so it is such a complex thing, motherhood. I mean, you know, we could talk about it all afternoon, couldn't we?
I think it's a subject we definitely need to revisit, maybe at a later date, isn't it? Because it is, you know, there's just so much, but you encapsulate your experience beautifully with the second. I mean, I urge people to buy this collection of poetry, because it has quickly become one of my, let me hold it up again, it's quickly become one of my favorites. You know, it's I reach for it, I like to flick through. I get something new out of it every time that I read it. But if I can just bring you back to, actually, before you read Russian Doll, if I can just bring you back to the last poem, which is The Swing, because I think that I think you just ended the collection, so it's like a full circle, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you picked up on that, because that was very much my intention, because the swing is just, again, about being in the moment and remembering that, you know, still as adults, we can be in the moment and experience the joy of childhood again by setting aside the phones and the worries about bills and finances, and just live in the moment. And that's the thing, definitely being with my children, going to playgrounds, and, you know, climbing onto a swing with them on the other side, or with them on the other swing, and being in that moment just for 30 seconds, for a minute or two, and just swinging. And if you really experience the moment, you realize, you think back to childhood, and this again was what it's like, being in the moment. And it's so funny, so many philosophers and people who do yoga, and, you know, they're always like saying, you've got to be in the moment. Being in the moment is the true way forward. And I think, well, yeah, definitely. It's so hard for us to do that, but being a kid again, trying to remember, and that's what, you know, that's what parents and mums and dads get to do. They get to do that with their kids, and if they can really embrace that, they will again find that sort of peace and calm when, you know, experiencing something just like climbing on a swing and swinging.
It is the power of now, isn't it? As Eckhart Tolle, his famous book talks about the power of now, and it's mindfulness, and it's all of that collectively. But it's reaching back into the child within as well, to share with your own children. And I can see why grandparents enjoy their time with grandchildren so much, because they don't have the responsibility of the care, but they have all the joy of you know, messing about on the playground again, if they're lucky enough to still have the health to do that. I know we are getting a little bit short on time, and I really do want you to finish with Russian Doll. And before you do, I will just mention that the pamphlet is published by Indigo Dreams Publishing, and I will be putting a list of places that this is available to buy. beneath the blog post and also on the YouTube channel. So people don't need to be scribbling away in the background. That information will be available. Okay. But for today, anyway, because I'm sure we'll meet again, but for the last time, Teika, thank you so much. And if I can just hand back to you now to read us out with Russian Doll.
Okay, yeah. So I will read it, but again, it's one of those poems. I just want to say that I loved being a mother, but obviously it's challenging. So what it's tried to do is encapsulate all of that, and I'm sure some other mums will agree with me or understand.
Yeah.
Russian Doll. I am heavy with the hopes of my younger selves, the ones who dreamt of all I could be. They call to me, disappointed, as my once bright dress begins to dull, as I thin and am worn smooth by little hands that dismantle me daily. I answer with excuses and apologies. Life intrudes, I explain, takes us apart and rebuilds us askew.
And I've just noticed the Russian dolls in the background there on your shelf as well. I mean, it's just perfect. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you. Thank you for joining me for the first audience booked by. I think we'll be seeing you again in the future to talk about all things to do with writing, with motherhood, with the stresses of strains of trying to capture a creative life when we have so much else going on. You know, it's hard to make time for these things. But I just want to end by saying thank you for giving us Russian Doll, because I think it's a poetry that will speak to so many people. Gorgeous cover. I'm matching it with my top.
Yeah.
You have your Russian dolls in the background. And that was just a perfect way to end the interview. So
well,
thank
you
so
very much, Tracy. I really appreciated you wanting to talk to me about it. And I love talking to you. You know, I could go on for ages. I think we could chat forever, couldn't we?
I think we could, and I'm looking forward to being able to do that, actually. But I will just say to anybody who's tuned in, please do join us again, because next time I will be speaking with the children's author, Hazel Stewart, about writing for children and adults. So do look out for that on an audience booked by. But for today, and sadly, we've run out of time because we really could have gone on and talked so much more. But thank you to Teika Marija Smits. Please look out for her pamphlet collection. But for now, it's goodbye from us. Thank you, Teika. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.